Tommy Bunn was still up with the hare and the dog, but the animals had run away to the left of him, higher up the slope. Tommy started shouting and waving his arms as if he were calling to someone near the hare. The panting men running behind couldn't see who he was calling to, but the hare zagged again and began running down the hill towards Tommy, and Tommy shouted all the more. Flyer was on the hare's tail and turned with the hare as neatly as if she were tied to it, and she snapped her teeth closed on the hare's hind foot. The hare screamed and screamed, a terrible sound, and Tommy Bunn ran up the hill towards the hare and the dog, shouting at the top of his voice. The dog was so surprised that it threw up its head to look at the boy and let the hare go, and the hare darted forward and leapt into the boy's arms. Tommy wrapped the hare in his jacket and ran away downhill. The men stopped running and stood gasping for breath, watching the boy go. From the hillside, they watched him go all the way to the house where he lived with his granny. The dogs came round them, even Flyer, wagging their tails and hoping their masters would tell them what to do, because they didn't know.
"What do you make of that?"
Joel asked when he had the breath. But no matter what the others thought of it, none of them could say anything. They were panting so hard. After a while, Joel started off down the hill, and all the others, dogs and men, followed him, though some of them were so tired they had to lean together. Joel led them to the poor little house where Tommy Bunn lived with his granny. Joel knocked and went into the kitchen. Not everyone followed him in. A lot of the men were afraid of Granny Bunn. The dogs stayed in the yard, whining. Granny Bunn was sitting by the fire, and Tommy was kneeling in front of her, winding a bandage round her foot. Beside him was a bowl of reddened water, as if he'd just washed a wound.
"Come in, gentlemen, come in. Did you have a good hunt?"
the old woman asked. They took off their caps, and Joel said,
"We did, thanks. Have you hurt your foot?"
"I'm a clumsy old fool,"
said Granny Bunn.
"I dropped a knife on it. Thank goodness I've got Tommy. He looks after his old granny. Will you have a cup of tea with us? Tommy, put the kettle on."
"Don't bother,"
Joel said.
"Don't bother for us. We're just going."
And Joel backed out of the kitchen, and all the others went with him. Joel had meant to ask for his 3 shillings back, since Tommy had taken the hare, but in front of Granny Bunn he didn't dare. As they hurried away from the little house, one of the men, who'd been running close behind Tommy, but had been too out of breath to speak before, said,
"Did you hear what Tommy was shouting?"
"Shouting? When?"
Joel asked.
"When the dog was close on the hare and Tommy started shouting and waving. 'Run, Gran, run!' That's what he shouted."
They all stopped in the road, with the dogs pressing against their legs, and looked at each other.
"Run, Gran, run!" he shouted, and the hare ran to him and jumped into his arms.
Joel was still a moment. Then he took off at a run, and when he started running, so did everybody else. All those men and all those dogs, running as if they were hares with dogs after them, running as far away from Granny Bunn and her grandson as they could get, as fast as they could go. The Doctor's Dog. Dr. Glazebrook used to be our doctor. She was a bit special because she was the doctor that the police called out if they had someone who needed medical treatment. They used to call her up at all hours, but she was used to that. People would telephone her and ask her to come and look at a spotty baby, or a relative who'd come over all peculiar, or fallen off a chair, or turned a funny colour. So Dr. Glazebrook would put her bag and Thane in the car, and off she'd go. Thane was her dog. He wasn't an ordinary dog. He frightened the life out of most people the first time they saw him, which didn't do them much good if they were ill. But Dr. Glazebrook would rather her patients had died of shock than leave Thane behind. Thane was a deerhound. That meant that he could put his front paws on the shoulders of a tall man as easily as other dogs would put them on a man's knee, and Thane would still be a head taller than the man. He was enormous and heavy and grey and shaggy, with long, long white teeth. A lot of people thought he was a wolf, but wolves are never so big. Thane ate 4 pounds of meat a day and needed hours of exercise, which is why the doctor took him everywhere with her. She got up early to take him a walk every morning, and on Saturdays and Sundays she took him for long walks in the country, hoping that no one would call her out for an emergency. Dr. Glazebrook had bought Thane because she lived alone, and because she often had to go alone at night to places where you never quite knew who might be around. She thought she'd feel safer if she had a big dog, so she went full measure and bought one of the biggest dogs ever heard of. Thane was really very gentle and affectionate, and was always trying to climb onto Dr. Glazebrook's lap for a cuddle. But he didn't look like that kind of dog at all. And he never barked or made much noise moving about. If you knocked at Dr. Glazebrook's door, she would open it, and then, suddenly, there would be this huge, shaggy thing breathing in your face and showing its teeth. You didn't get any warning at all. People used to jump out of their shoes. Thane would lie on the floor of the doctor's surgery while she was seeing patients, and if she moved towards a patient to examine them, that was okay. Thane would just watch with one eye and perhaps thump his tail on the floor. But if a patient moved towards the doctor, no matter what the reason, Thane would lift up his front end very suddenly and show his teeth. He wouldn't growl, but the patient would sit well back in his chair and freeze. Thane just wasn't a dog you felt like taking risks with. There was too much of him. Then Thane died. He was old, and despite all the care Dr. Glazebrook took of him, his heart gave out. Dr. Glazebrook was so upset she had to take time off work. She had really loved that dog, and it was years, really, before she got over his dying. She'd owned dogs before, she said, but never one like Thane. Never one so special and intelligent and loving. While Thane had been around, she said, she'd never felt lonely or nervous, either at home or travelling about late at night.
If I'd had a special guard of your men following me about, I couldn't have felt safer,
she told the police inspector.
You'll be getting a new dog then?
The inspector asked.
Oh, no,
Dr. Glazebrook said.
I don't think so. Well, not for a while anyway. Not after Thane. He was too special.
Even 2 years later, Dr. Glazebrook hadn't got another dog. If you went to see her at her surgery, you'd go in expecting there to be a big grey shape lying on the floor near her desk, taking up most of the room. And when there wasn't, you felt uneasy somehow about that empty space. You'd keep looking at it. The trees outside the window would throw moving shadows on the floor, and you'd look quick, thinking you'd seen Thane move. But there'd just be the yellow carpet, bare and vacuumed clean of dog hairs. Dr. Glazebrook got a bit fed up of people asking her when she was going to get another dog.
I don't feel I need one anymore,
she said.
You know, when Thane died, I thought I'd be nervous without him, but I'm not a bit.
Maybe he's still with you, I said to her once.
Now don't go starting silly rumours like that,
she said. Then came the night the police sent a car for her, because a man they'd arrested needed medical treatment. She thought the man looked at her oddly when she went into the room where they were holding him. The kind of look someone gives you when they think they know you, but aren't sure. But Dr. Glazebrook didn't know this man, so she took no notice. While she was stitching him up, he said,
You went to that cash dispenser the other night, didn't you? The one outside the bank in the High Street.
What of it?
Dr. Glazebrook asked.
I saw you,
He said.
I saw all that money you got out. Fancy you being the one to patch me up. If you hadn't had that big dog with you, I'd have had that money.
What dog?
Dr. Glazebrook shouted. The man was startled.
Your dog. The dog with you. Biggest dog I ever saw. It was like a ruddy wolf.
I didn't have a dog with me.
Dr. Glazebrook said.
Yes, you did.
The man said, getting a bit angry.
A big grey dog. It followed you up to the dispenser, sat by you while you got the money, and then it followed you off to your car. And it gave me a kind of look, so I knew I wasn't going to try anything. A dog that size could eat you.
Dr. Glazebrook finished treating the man, and then felt she needed treatment herself. The police gave her a cup of hot tea and a comfortable chair in an office to sit down for a while.
You come over a bit faint, Doctor?
A young constable asked her. She said yes. She wasn't going to tell the police the real reason because she reckoned they'd think she was mad, which was daft because the police are always being called out to investigate ghosts and poltergeists. The doctor went home and sat alone in her house, in the dark, and she wondered about how she always felt quite happy like that, as if she had company. She said aloud,
Thane.
And amongst all the other creaks and noises of the house, she heard a thump, thump, as if a big, heavy dog's tail was beating on the carpet. She came to see me once when I had flu. I asked her if she was ever going to get another dog, and she told me all this to explain why she wasn't.
I don't need one, you see.
She said.
And anyway, how could I get another dog? Thane might not like it, and he's so good. I'd hate to upset him.
I looked very carefully at the empty air all round her when she left to go back to her surgery. But I couldn't see anything. And you'd think Thane would be easy enough to spot, even as a ghost. But whenever I go to Dr. Glazebrook's surgery now, I can't look at anything except that empty patch of carpet by her desk. The way the shadows move over it, they make you see things from the corner of your eye.